Well, hello and welcome to the Revival News. With me in the studio, I have Barb and Tori. Welcome. We are so happy to have them here. We've been hearing about this new disability class, and they have been here yesterday and today, hardworking and recording this. So thank you for being here and being with us now on the news. And I'm very excited about this, and I know many of you are very excited about this disabilities class. So we want to hear from you a little bit about this class. But first, let me ask you guys, how did you get into this ministry? How did you come to know the Lord and get passionate about this field of ministry, disabilities, all of those things?
Well, certainly would love to answer that. I am delighted to be here and that this institute is offering a course on thinking about people of all abilities. So that's a joy as well. Certainly I had the privilege of growing up in a home with a pastor for a dad and have been mentored through all my years thinking about the things of God. But growing into that, of course, as you get older, thinking about different avenues. I was a special education teacher in a Christian school, still do that in Zeeland, Michigan, but realized that so many of my students had been unable to find places of worship. So parents were asked to leave, they were kicked out of Sunday school, they weren't allowed in the boys' club at the church, and it's like, really? Because those kids are included for 7 hours a day here. They really launched the opportunity to think in the late 1990s, how can we, as an organization, as All Belong, Center for Inclusive Education, how can we not only support schools, Christian schools, Catholic schools, but also how can we help congregations better say yes instead of go away, right? Better say you are welcome here. And so think not only about children now, but also about adults. And that has been just a joy to be able to do that. And this course is a culmination of that thinking. So
awesome.
And I sort of came into ministry as a child. My parents were actually the children's ministry directors who passed it off to Barb at our church when she took over as children's ministry director. And so I sort of started working in children's ministry from the time that I was about 8 and just continued on as Barb took over. And then throughout the years, we became really good friends, and I started to work for her at Zeeland Christian School at one point. And then God just gave us the opportunity through various connections that the position came open at All Belong, Center for Inclusive Education. And I said, oh, well, I could do that too. So our friendship and our ties just sort of strengthened through all of that as well. So I've just sort of followed along as much as I could, and God has opened many opportunities. But I have to say my passion for inclusive environments in church really became alive when I was diagnosed with a chronic illness and I could no longer attend church because of the physical impact on my body. And so started to think much more about that and how so many families really need church community in different ways and how our church environments really affect the way that we're able to participate in worship. So my work took on new meaning after that in my life as well.
Yes, became very personal. Well, that is so amazing to hear, and I know that's something that so many of you, and I love how you guys go all abilities. So I think that is a really, really incredible way to be going forward, inclusive environment. So what is this class going to be? It's called Creating Congregations of Belonging with People of All Abilities. Okay, I love that. So what are going to be some of the highlights, the big things that this class is going to be teaching and be about?
well, I'm glad you pointed that out, because one of the exciting things for us is, as we've thought more and as we've come alongside so many congregations, what we've discovered is that when people hear the word disabilities, they're thinking of a very small segment of people.
Limited, yeah.
What we found is that with strategies and with ideas in place, with this concept people will learn about called universal design and how that's applied in our congregations, what really happens is when we begin to think differently and implement a variety of strategies, we're really impacting 100% of the people who are part of congregations, right? So as we think about all abilities, if you have an intergenerational worship service, you have a 3-year-old standing next to a 57-year-old, that is the definition of all abilities right there. And so as people learn about strategies, that's the joy of being able to think, wow, we can worship as one with all of the people gathered here. So the course is about a framework, a 3-part framework to think about how do we make sure we have opportunity access points accessibility in worship or in children's ministry or in adult small groups for each person who's part of this place. Could be a person with Down syndrome or autism, could be a person who has an IQ of 140 and is a college professor but prefers learning through things that are visual. I don't know, whatever that person may be. But how do we construct these environments?
Right,
and then
right.
the second part of the course, again, really diving into, so what is autism spectrum disorder and what are some very practical strategies
Right.
we can use? What is dementia? And how can we worship with persons of all abilities who have that particular area of difference? So we're really going to become specific about
Right.
different areas of disability after we've sort of gone through this exciting framework of perspective, participation, and personalization. So that's the course.
Love
and
that.
people will
That's
leave
very
with
exciting.
tons of practical ideas.
Good. Lots of ways to practically help you in ministry in whatever field that you are in. This is something we all come across people of all abilities, as you guys are saying. So this is so important for us to know that. So speaking on to that, why would this be really good for a student of Christian Leaders Institute, College Alliance to take this class?
Here we go. We firmly believe that leaders in congregations are responsible for making sure, if you're the worship leader, you're responsible for 100% of the worshipers. If you're the pastor, you're pastoring 100% of the people who are part of that congregation.
Right.
If you are the youth group leader, 100% of those teens are part of your ministry. And yet we know how frustrated that person can get sometimes when it's like, really, I'm the children's ministry director and I don't know what to do when this family walks in with a child with Down
Right.
syndrome. Or I'm the worship leader and I don't know why we've got 3 people covering their ears when the band starts to play.
Right.
I'm the visiting pastor and I am supposed to have an engagement with a person with dementia. How do I do that? So again, this is equipping for whatever
Equipping,
ministry
absolutely.
position people hold. Because if you think of the worshipers gathered in front of you, they are people of all abilities. So these are just very practical tools to use and excite you with new ideas and opportunities to engage with each one. So that's why we think all leaders in ministry need to have access to this kind of a course.
Not to mention just the thinking about how do we do this as the church? How
Yeah.
do we reflect the kingdom of God? What does that look like in practical terms? We talk about this in theological basis of, right, God's door is open to all who would receive Christ. So how do we practically make the church look like the
That.
kingdom of God and welcome each worshiper who would come into his kingdom? And so even just for those who are curious about things or want to think about this from a theological standpoint and say, well, what does it look like if we really put our hands and feet into this? And this is what it looks like. All of these practical tools in looking at who is it who's in our congregation? What do we mean when we say disability? What do we mean when we say people of all abilities are welcome here? What does it mean when we say we are ready? And what does it look like to be the church? And this is really, truly a vision for what that is.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for what you're doing. This is so needed. I know it's something that I could greatly benefit from taking. I know so many of you also this would really, really help and equip you in your ministry. So thank you guys for being here, for doing this class. I cannot wait for it to come out. Stay tuned, everyone. It's going to be getting released in the next little bit here. Thank you guys again for being here. God bless you in this ministry that you're doing.